Under the bright stage lights, she was a legend. In the darkened corridors behind the curtain, she was a secret keeper. How many standing ovations does it take to drown out a memory? How long can someone smile on stage while quietly burning with the truth? For Jeannie Seely, the woman who broke barriers at the Grand Ole Opry, the applause was never loud enough to silence what happened behind closed doors. Now nearly 90, her voice is gentler, her steps slower, but her story, long buried in silence, is finally rising to the surface, steady and unstoppable. Long after the glitter of her sequined gowns faded and the bright lights dimmed, one memory refused to die. It began in 1971, in the heart of the Opry during a backstage power outage. Jeannie, then in the prime of her career, was called to a place she'd never heard of before. Room 6B. It wasn't on any map, not even whispered about by the artists or crew. She followed a narrow hallway that bent around costume racks and quiet dressing rooms until she reached a door with no nameplate, just a faint hum behind it that sounded like static or breathing. Inside stood a man no one spoke of, never photographed, but deeply known. One of the quiet bosses. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence alone delivered the message. Some rules weren't meant to be broken, and some people weren't meant to rise too far. That 11-minute meeting left her cold and hollow. She walked out, not with answers, but with the unshakable weight of warning. In the parking lot, without a word to anyone, Jeannie took her favorite blue sequin dress, the one she wore for her proudest performance, and set it on fire. The rhinestones melted quietly under the flame as a janitor swept nearby, saying nothing, just watching. That night, something in her changed. Something was stolen from her that would never fully return. Afterward, her performances were shortened, her name left off introductions, and whispers began, words like difficult, unstable, emotional. But Jeannie kept showing up. Jeannie didn't enter the world of country music with connections or privilege. Born in Pennsylvania to a steel mill worker father and a hymn-singing mother, her only passport into Nashville was pure grit. At 16, she mailed handwritten lyrics into the void. At 21, she packed a suitcase and a half-used typewriter and moved south, chasing a dream that felt more like a dare. The nights were lonely, filled with temp jobs and half-empty lounges where she sang to strangers who barely looked up. Her break came not with a standing ovation, but with a quiet moment. A man in a dark suit handed her a card after a performance. That song became "Don't Touch Me," and it changed everything. But success didn't bring acceptance. The industry didn't know what to do with a woman like Jeannie. Bold makeup, short skirts, cracking jokes, and not afraid to demand respect. They wanted women who smiled, nodded, and stayed in line. Jeannie was never that woman. The more she pushed back, the more they tried to silence her. She was given the worst time slots, paired with acts who openly disrespected her, and sidelined from key events. Then came the second call to Room 6B. No one ever requested those meetings. They arrived as a folded slip of paper, unmarked but unmistakable. This time, the conversation was shorter. A few words, a veiled threat. Jeannie left shaken, but this time, she didn't cry. She went home and began documenting every slight, every manipulation, every denied mic and whispered rumor. She typed them on onion skin paper with her manual typewriter and folded them carefully into a shoebox under her bed, wrapping it with her mother's red scarf. She never told anyone, not even her husband. It wasn't for revenge. It was protection. Proof. An insurance policy against being rewritten or forgotten. Over the years, she watched it happen to others. Dottie West, shunned in her final days. Loretta Lynn, always walking a careful line. Naomi Judd, haunted by questions no one dared ask. Patsy Cline, labeled problematic and hard to work with. Skeeter Davis, banned for speaking out. These weren't isolated stories. They were patterns. The Opry didn't erase you overnight. It let you fade slowly, until even your fans forgot why you left. Jeannie kept notes on every woman who disappeared, every farewell that never came, every name that slowly vanished from the rotation. And she kept singing. Not because she was welcomed, but because she refused to disappear. In 1991, a fire tore through her second home. Flames destroyed walls and photographs, but the shoebox survived. The scarf melted into its edges, but the letters were intact. Sitting among the ashes, Jeannie read them again, weeping not from grief, but recognition. "I wasn't crazy," she whispered. She wasn't imagining the way the system worked against her. The evidence was in her hands. But still she waited. She didn't want pity. She wanted the right time. That time came not with fanfare, but a knock on her door. A young graduate student researching forgotten women of country music had found one of her letters, misfiled, yellowed, tucked behind unrelated documents. It was a detailed account of her second visit to room 6B. The letter contained names, dates, threats, and a haunting line. "If I speak of this again, I will be removed from the stage before I finish my next verse." It was more than history, it was truth. Proof that the silence had never been voluntary. The discovery shook Jeannie deeply. She began to revisit everything. The way people looked at her backstage. The nods that carried more weight than words. The subtle punishments that followed every act of defiance. She saw clearly now how many women were broken down not by failure, but by strategy. They weren't erased because they weren't good enough. They were erased because they asked questions, because they took up space, because they didn't obey. That was their crime. And she had survived it. She began to speak out, not loudly, not with headlines, but through small acts. A tribute here, a candid story there. She self-published a memoir with names blurred and truths disguised. It wasn't polished. It wasn't promoted. But it made its way around quiet circles and dressing rooms. One night, an old technician knocked on her door after midnight. "I read it," he said softly. "And I believe every word." Jeannie's quiet defiance sparked something. A new backstage policy was adopted to prevent coercion. Some of the older producers resigned without a word. Younger women began to approach her, not in public, but in private, grateful for her courage. One whispered to her before a performance, "Thank you for not letting them bury you." Even as her body slowed, her mind remained sharp. Her assistant zipped her gowns now, but her voice still carried weight. And one night, as she sat on a stool waiting to sing, she realized this might be the last time. Not because they pushed her out, but because she was finally ready to go. There was no farewell show, no grand celebration. Just an empty stool after she left, and the heavy silence that followed. But her story didn't end there. Her memoir continued to circulate. Her shoebox, once hidden, was donated to a music archive with one condition. It must be released if anyone ever tries to erase her. It sits now in a locked room, her handwriting preserved for the next truth seeker. Her voice, no longer booming on stage, lives on in whispers, questions, and quiet courage passed from one woman to another. Jeannie Seely didn't leave the Opry bitter. She left it changed. Her photos still hang backstage. No one dares take them down. Her name is spoken with a different kind of respect now. Not just as a performer, but as a witness. A keeper of stories too long ignored. She didn't just survive the Opry's shadow, she exposed it, one letter, one song, one memory at a time. And when asked what she would say to the Opry now, her answer carried no rage, only a tired truth. "I gave you my best years. You gave me your rules. I outlived them." That's the kind of victory that doesn't need applause. Just silence. And listening. If Jeannie's story moved you the way it's moved countless others, let her truth echo a little louder by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who believes in courage, even when it's quiet. Her song still plays. Let's make sure it's heard.